On the board, 11 years, 12 years, 11 years.
I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Highlands Town Board of Commissioners, and the purpose of this meeting tonight is to conduct a public hearing concerning the proposed amendments to the UDO related to short-term rentals. We have two proposals that were sent to the planning board and one that the planning board drafted and approved. Any one of these proposals can be addressed tonight, or anyone would like, all the proposals can be addressed. Speakers will have 3 minutes to speak. I have an innovation since the last meeting. I am keeping the time. If you run over 3 minutes, I will put up the yellow flag, and I'd appreciate you bringing your remarks to a close. We have asked that we would accept for the hearing written statements, and they have been coming in since Monday. And our town clerk, Gable Shaheen, is maintaining and filing those statements. They will be accepted for the next 24 hours. If anyone wants to make a statement concerning the hearing, we will accept those statements. They will be sent to the town board after that time. They will be sent to the sunshine list, and they will be posted on the website as a part of the hearing. This hearing is being broadcast on YouTube, and it will be recorded on YouTube. I would appreciate that we have no clapping or applause between speakers or during anyone speaking who has the floor. I would also appreciate no reactions or talk during the time that a speaker is making a statement. If that becomes a problem, I will ask the people that continue to do that to be removed from the hearing. The speaker sign up was opened until 5:05. We have passed that hour, so now we have all of our written request for being able to speak at this hearing, and I'll be going in order. The next thing I would like to say is that, as we did with the last hearing, we will allow attorneys for any group to come and make a statement on behalf of that group, and I've determined that they will have 15 minutes to make those statements. And with that said, the concept behind that is that the people that would like from that group or represent that group, i.e. the Save Highlands group or the neighborhood coalition, that folks that would have made statements have yielded their time to the attorney that represents their organization. So with that said, I'm going to open up the hearing and open up the floor. And I believe we have from the Save Highlands group, their attorney, Derek Allen, who would like to come forward and make a statement. So all the speakers, I would appreciate you coming and facing the board and speaking into the microphone. We've asked that you state your name and your place of residence. If you do not want to do that, you certainly can decline, but we would appreciate it if you're willing to let us know where your permanent residence is. Okay, all right, second. Thank you very much. All in favor? Thank you. Our hearing now is open, and we will begin hearing statements. Mr. Allen.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners, staff, residents, property owners of Highlands. My name is Derek Allen. I'm an attorney at Asheville, North Carolina, at Allen, Stall, and Kilbourne. I'm here tonight. The plaintiffs in the lawsuit that is currently pending have ceded their time to me to speak on their behalf. I don't think I'll need 15 minutes. I did want to take this time, though, to address you because this is only the second time that we've been able to have this kind of discussion since this has been going on for a year and 1 day. As I said in the letter I sent out yesterday, as I said in the remarks on February 24th, in this room, our clients have craved dialogue, have craved to be a part of this process, to have input, and to be able to negotiate terms of acceptable regulations. We're disappointed that we've not been able to do that. We're disappointed in the town. We're disappointed in the process, but we're still trying, and we're trying to come up with a compromise. We will continue to send those things out. We'll continue to redline documents. We'll continue to speak our piece on what we believe the law is. We're willing to bring both sides of this together. We're willing to work with the planning board. We're willing to work with individual members of this board. We're willing to work with the neighbors, staff, the mayor. We want to have that kind of conversation. We think that this matter is important enough for all property owners and all property rights believers to have that kind of say and that kind of input. Quickly through the timeline, our involvement began about a year ago. About a year ago, we get a call from our clients, the folks I'm speaking on behalf of tonight, that said that the town was going to rule that their current existing use of their property as short-term rentals was now being deemed to be illegal. I said, that's certainly not the case. They can't take away a valid non-conforming use. They can't take away that grandfathered right. Certainly, they're not doing that. But that's what this town had attempted to do. And they had set a timeline of January 3rd for that to go into effect. We immediately started to look at the issue, and we ended up having to file a complaint to enforce that, to challenge the town on its ability to make that regulation, to challenge the town on its interpretation, it's even its authority to make that interpretation. In response to that complaint, the town walked back that August 24 determination, walked back the January 3rd deadline that was looming. And that deadline that was looming was real. There were existing reservations that were in jeopardy. People's livelihoods were in jeopardy. People that work in the industry were in jeopardy. Their jobs were in jeopardy. It was a big deal that was coming down the pipe. The town rightfully walked that back because they had no authority to do it. We were then optimistic that the process was going to take the right course, that we were going to be involved. It was going to go back through the planning board process as new legislation, new ordinance inside of the town, and we appeared to have a say. We showed up on February 24th and we made remarks. In that, we walked through what we believe to be a decent outline that had been drafted by the planning board and redlined by the planning board. And we sent our remarks in response to that, not just by making remarks at February 24th meeting, but also in a written letter that detailed our own red lines to that document that we sent out on March 4th. We were hoping that that document would continue to be discussed. We were hoping that we would be involved in the process. And for a moment, we almost had a meeting with other parties involved. It was canceled the Thursday before the Friday it's supposed to be held. Again, disappointing. Then we heard nothing. We had no response. We heard nothing. Instead, what we got was a new process, a new ordinance that we'd seen that this town attempted to run through again. And again, we looked at it and said, this is improper. The process hasn't been followed. It didn't go through the planning board. And we sent a letter after the fact again and challenged the town on that. And the town said, yeah, you're right. We didn't do the process right. So here we are 1 year, 1 day later, and we're arguing and debating the same pieces. I want to be real clear about the two issues that are out there right now. One is the ability to regulate short-term rentals going forward. Under North Carolina law, our clients understand, and we've said all along through this, that if the town wants to do that, they can put reasonable regulations going forward. There are some limitations to those things because it can regulate short-term rentals going forward. What it can't do is eliminate existing uses that are valid right now. Those grandfathered uses cannot be attacked. We said that last year, and now here we are at the exact same issue 1 year, 1 day later, and now we're calling it amortization. not familiar with the concept. It's been used very, very limited in North Carolina. Sexually oriented businesses, signs, and a junkyard that I've seen being quoted for a case that came out in the 1970s. I'm not aware of amortization being used anywhere in the country for short-term rentals. And it really doesn't make a lot of sense because of the way that you would finance purchasing a home. Eliminating those valid existing uses is a big dig to our clients. If you look at our red line, we don't say anything about regulating those uses going forward. Our pieces are making sure that those existing rights that they have relied on stay in place. And we believe the courts agree with us. Courts are routinely striking down these kinds of regulations across the country. Austin, Texas, tried and lost. Hendersonville, Tennessee, same result. Wilmington, we know the Schroeder case. This past Monday, the Fifth Circuit struck down a New Orleans short-term rental ordinance. The trend is for the court to side on the rights of those property owners. On the issue of taking away those valid non-conforming uses, those grandfathered uses, you can't allow something to happen, let it go on, continue to tell people it's allowed to happen, and then take it away from them. The law will jealously protect that every time. We think we win on that issue all day long. We don't even think it's a close legal question. The School of Government agrees with us. Institute for Justice agrees with us. The court cases agree with us. But we're really not here to talk about that so much as what it looks like going forward. And if this was only about regulating short-term rentals going forward and not looking backwards, then we would all be on the same page and we'd come up with something that works. The stance that Highlands as a town is taking is overly aggressive. It's in really, really weak legal territory. And it doesn't seem like the right thing to do. We ask that none of these ordinances be passed. We think they're illegal. We think that we presented an alternative based off the planning board's February and March deliberations that is workable. And it's not an all or nothing. We're open to negotiate that, debate that, but it does have to do those two things. Only look prospectively and to protect those rights of those folks already doing those uses. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is, I'm going to ask Kathy Henson of the Neighborhood Coalition has been asked an opportunity to introduce their attorney for the Neighborhood Coalition, and he will make a statement. Kathy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. If it helps, I am an attorney, and I'm going to share my time with Mr. McCarley and Charlie Nalbone, who's also an attorney. I am president of the Neighborhood Coalition. I also own a home on Satula Mountain. I've owned that home since 2004. Our position is simple. Homeowners deserve to live in neighborhoods with other neighbors. When we bought our homes in R1, we believed in the plain meaning of what the zoning states: exclusively low density, single family residential, no commercial activity, including overnight accommodations. We believed it then, and we believe it now. A year ago, the town attorney agreed with us when he announced that the town would begin enforcing the prohibition on short-term rentals in residential neighborhoods beginning in January 2022. He further stated at that time, short-term rentals are not defined in the UDO, and perhaps they should be. And so here we are. The task is not easy, as we have seen over the course of this past year, but it is relatively simple. When is the use of a house more like a hotel, obviously a commercial activity, than a home, a residential activity? Remember, zoning is all about land use, not about the structure itself. To answer this question, we must look at how the house is being used. And there are two aspects to consider. Is the activity engaged in for profit? And how often does the activity occur? Making money is the essential character of a commercial activity. And we're all here tonight because the proponents of short-term rentals are afraid that their ability to make a profit will be negatively impacted if limits are placed on short-term rentals. It is referred to as the short-term rental industry for a reason. The second aspect to consider is frequency. Is the use of a house for profit part of the regular use of the house? Is it rented out nightly, every weekend, every week, every month, by individuals who pay to stay there at a nightly rate. Our solution is simple. We believe that short-term rental should be defined as any rental of less than 30 days duration and should be absolutely prohibited in R1 and R2 neighborhoods. Let the investors build hotels and short-term rental housing in those areas more appropriately zoned for commercial activities. Just leave the neighborhoods to the neighbors. The only proposal before you tonight that merits our support is option 2, with the amortization provision to sunset all short-term rentals in R1 and R2 residential neighborhoods. The sooner the better. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce Mr. Mac McCarley, who's a partner at Parker Poe. He's counsel for the Highlands Neighborhood Coalition. He specializes in local government regulatory and public policy matters. He served as the city attorney for Charlotte for 17 years. He's here to specifically address the issue of amortization and other relevant questions you may have. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Mac McCarley. Mayor, you asked where I live. I live in rural Montgomery County, North Carolina. I practice out of the Charlotte office of Parker Poe, but I live out in the country. I'm here to speak to you tonight about why amortization is a lawful tool that you may use to regulate short-term rentals. I want to make 3 points to you tonight. First, that the amortization draft before you does not violate the holdings of the Wilmington case. Second, that amortization law is settled in North Carolina and may be applied by you to the use of single-family homes as short-term rentals in specified zones. And the third point is that if the town is sued, the likelihood of an award of attorney's fees to a plaintiff is very remote. So, returning to point number 1. The first issue is that the amortization draft before you doesn't violate the holdings in the Wilmington case. Your ordinance proposal was drafted by the very law firm that represented the city of Wilmington in that case. If anyone in the state knows how to draft an ordinance that complies with the holdings in that case, it's Bob Hageman, your consulting attorney on this matter. Of particular note is the fact that the court in the Wilmington case didn't rule on amortization. In fact, the case was decided on the simple question of whether Wilmington had enacted a registration system that the statutes specifically prohibited. Your amortization draft does not include a prohibited registration system. The second point, amortization is settled law in North Carolina and may be used by you to amortize short-term rentals out of R1 and R2 zones. Amortization has been considered by the appellate courts in North Carolina 6 times. The first of those was State versus Joyner, a state Supreme Court case in 1972, where the court allowed the city of Winston-Salem to amortize a construction debris junkyard over a 3-year period. Since then, the North Carolina Court of Appeals has consistently applied that law in 5 cases, applying the holdings of State versus Joyner. First, in 1980, in County of Cumberland versus Eastern Federal Corporation, the court upheld a 3-year amortization period, removing non-conforming signs. 2 years later, in R.O. Givens versus Town of Nags Head, the court upheld a 5.5-year amortization, removing non-conforming billboards. 2 years after that, in 1984, in Goodman Toyota versus the City of Raleigh, the court upheld a 90-day amortization prohibiting windblown signs, which in that case was a 14-foot advertising blimp. And then in Summey Outdoor Advertising versus Henderson County, the court upheld a 5-year amortization, removing non-conforming freestanding signs. Finally, in 1997, in Manor versus Onslow County, the court upheld a 2-year amortization of the location of sexually oriented businesses. Here's the most important thing about each of those 5 cases in the Court of Appeals. The Supreme Court refused to review the rulings in any of those 5, and they were petitioned to do so in all 5 and refused all 5 times, allowing the Court of Appeals decisions to stand as good law in North Carolina. I also want to point out that in the cases with lengthy amortization periods, those 5 and 5.5 year periods, the ordinance has required the structures to be removed in addition to ceasing the use. In the 2-year amortization of the location of sexually oriented businesses, the structures weren't removed, just the use. That's the case in your amortization proposal too. No single family structure is to be removed. The owners of those structures may still make lawful use of the structure as a long-term rental, as a home, or they may sell it. No property is taken from them. Just one use is amortized and prohibited at a date certain in the future. The third point I want to make is that I know you've been threatened with attorney's fees should a plaintiff's group succeed in the lawsuit. GS 6-21.7, which is the relevant statute, states that if a court finds, and this is the quote, that the city or county violated a statute or case law setting forth unambiguous limits on its authority, the court shall award reasonable attorney's fees and costs. But as I've just outlined for you, the case law in North Carolina unambiguously supports amortization in appropriate cases. The award of attorney's fees to any plaintiff challenging an amortization ordinance in North Carolina is extremely unlikely. The conclusion is that you have the authority to enact an amortization proposal, and the one before you, option 2, is a well-drafted proposal. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. All right, and Lila Howland, Tom Coley, and Bob McEver, they had yielded their time to Mr. McCarley. Okay, the next person who would be on the speakers list would be James Worrell.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to cede my time to Charlie now.
Okay, and he's the next person on the list, Charlie.
Mr. Mayor, we actually asked both to give me, I don't know why my name got voting on this. I spoke to you
It has to be
that.
what?
Has to go again. That's all right.
You asked at what time?
About 4:55.
Okay. All right, our next speaker then would be Carol Gable.
I'm speaking tonight personally as a homeowner. I am a member of the Highlands Neighborhood Coalition, but you know, my views are slightly different, but I just wanted to say that I live in R1 and I've had a home here for 26 years. For more than a year and meeting after meeting, what I've heard is short-term rental supporters talk about their investment, their income, their future, their property rights, and what this town owes them. The fact is that this town owes no one a particular return on any investment. Allowing short-term rentals in residential neighborhoods decays those residential neighborhoods from the inside out. It's a situation that once you lose it, you cannot get it back. My question is, what about our investment, our rights, our property values, our future in this town, and our support of so many organizations in this town that make life here better and better every year? 80% of the town's homeowners do not rent short term. I have renovated my house at great expense over several years. And I'd like to do more, but do I risk that? Would that be smart? Multiple short-term rental owners on my street have forced me and my neighbors against our will into their business plan. We suffer the downsides and they make the money. What new buyer is going to want to buy my house so that they can live next door or near a series of mini hotels? I'm really worried about the quality of residential life when you continually dump strangers into residential neighborhoods. As I speak tonight, a formerly 3-bed, 2-bath house, now advertised as a 5-bed, 3-bath house, is being raced to completion by an owner who didn't bother to get a construction permit. The 1970 septic system says it now will sleep 12. I've read through the 3 proposals carefully, and from my vantage point of 26 years, my feeling is that if short-term rentals are not banned completely in Highlands residential areas, this town is declaring that families and town residents have no place and no importance in Highlands, and I know you don't believe that. But the effectiveness will be that unless you're rich and you can live behind a gate or live behind a keypad, then you won't have the same rights to live in a nice family neighborhood. I've read about homestays. That's just another term for short-term rentals with the exact same downsides. Homestays are almost impossible to enforce and almost entirely dependent on neighbors to police their fellow neighbors so that they can identify and turn in cheaters. I don't want to live like that, and I don't know anybody who does. My last point is that a crucial omission that I see in all of the proposals, that there's no plan to stop new short-term rentals immediately. If their investors are rushing to get those to market right now, and if they're not banned, damage to our neighborhoods will spin out of control, and efforts to move them later will be vastly more difficult.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Lynn Luzier. Lynn? Okay, and Michael, you're next.
My name is Michael Eadie. I am a homeowner on Dog Mountain, same community as Carol. Our family has owned the house for nearly 60 years. I'm now a 4th generation homeowner in Highlands. I have a family of 4 kids and a wife. We bring our families up here quite often, 4 or 5 times a year. Love Highlands. It's a wonderful community. I've been coming up here since I was a child and when it was my great grandmother's house. So the point I would like to make today is that, you know, the future of Highlands and the economy of Highlands will ultimately be driven by my generation, the generation below me, my kids' generation. And quite frankly, we travel, we live, we vacation differently than maybe generations before us. That may not be true across the board, but that's generally true, a true statement. Towns like Highlands, it will be very difficult for a family like ours to come to Highlands with another family, friends, and our permanent residences in Birmingham, Alabama, to be able to travel up here if there are not short-term rentals available for us to be able to rent a house that might have 3,000 square feet where 2 adults and 4 kids and maybe another set of adults with 2 kids could roam comfortably and come up here and see all the beautiful waterfalls. One of the beautiful things I love about coming up here is the fact that, you know, we don't have great internet and my kids can't sit on an iPad and they're able to walk around and see the beauty of God's creation. And there's very few places on earth that have that to offer, like Highlands, North Carolina has that to offer. The other thing I would say is that there is a contingent of folks that say they represent Dog Mountain that's just simply not true. There is a lot of homeowners that live in that same community that are not opposed to short-term rentals. Again, our family has had the house. My great grandmother owned the house, and now I own the house. It's been in our house. It's been in our family for 4 generations. It's something that I look forward to bringing my kids up to. And hopefully one day my kids will own that same house and they'll be able to bring their kids up here and show their kids the beauty of Highlands. But ultimately, if Highlands doesn't adjust and move with the times, Highlands will be left behind and the town will be dissipated. And there will be no shoppers coming into these places and buying and spending $2,000 on a purse and things like that, that sometimes, unfortunately, my wife does spend $2,000 on a purse at times. So, or my kids spend $75 at Kilwins every time we go in there. Lord knows how much sugar is going into their body. But the future of this town will be built on the backs of large families like mine that ultimately, quite frankly, we can't afford to go put my kids in the old Edwards Inn. It's a beautiful hotel and I would love to go there with my wife, but nobody wants my kids running around that place either. So I would just ask you guys to consider the idea that there are a lot of families that look like mine and vacation like mine and live life like my family do. We don't want to disturb our neighbors. We ultimately don't want to do that. But for our family to be able to keep a 4th generation house in our family, we do have other renters come up and stay in our house. I would say 60% of the time, those are people that we know personally. And 40% of the time, those are people that we get through third-party sites that allow us to be able to rent those things and have contracts that they must abide by. And when they don't, we certainly don't want to disturb people. We certainly want to be good neighbors. That's always been the intent, at least from my perspective. And if we're not, we would want to correct those things. But I would just appreciate the time and the opportunity to come up here and share. Birmingham is home to us, but Highlands has become a second home for us. And quite frankly, there's been rough times over the last few years for folks. And I can tell people Highlands is one of the few places that I can come and feel the peace and serenity that can come from only a place like Highlands. And so I would love for that to continue to be the case. And I hope that you guys would consider that as well. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Okay. All right, our next speaker will be Pat Allen. Pat Allen. Pat Allen.
I always have to away, but I'm not. Good evening. I think one thing that we should start off mentioning tonight is at the last board meeting, Josh Ward and the town attorney admitted that short-term rentals are not commercial, as a lot of these people want to say they are. They are not hotels. So we need to just bury that fact. The other fact of importance is that first meeting, which was deemed urgent, and it was allowed on the Zoom that I watched, and every single commissioner in this room voted to ban short-term rentals. So we already know where y'all stand. So my point is this should be an unbiased decision made by people who understand. A study's been done that Highlands would lose $19 million in revenue each year. That's huge. You think about shop owners, you think about the economy of this town. So it just does not make sense to me. It never has. The responsibility for short-term rentals goes back to the homeowner. If they had a contract before it's signed by the renter that in bold letters said, we have a noise ordinance. If there's noise, the law enforcement will come. If they come, you will never be allowed back in my house. If they knock on the door twice because you don't calm down, everybody in there gets a fine. And then you take a $500 deposit. And if the law enforcement is called, they lose that. And you also put about the trash. There should be a minimum of 2 trash cans. Base it on the number of people that are going to be in that home. And that's a no-brainer. As far as the cars, it should be, if you have 3 parking places, that's what they have. If they need 5 cars, they go to the rec park and somebody picks them up. There are ways that this can be figured out. Unfortunately, it's become so complicated now. Nobody's going to win this fight. They aren't. And that's unfortunate. But I think the main thing is be unbiased. Even the planning board, we have biased people on there who are making decisions. They've already said we don't want them in our neighborhood. So how can they make a rational decision when it should be based on economy and the rights? I'm talking, thank you. And the rights of the homeowners. You put it back on them. We already have laws in place and they just need to be enforced. So I hope that you will. And one more point, the people who come here to rent short-term, the ones against them want us to believe everybody that rents here is just wild and crazy and loud. That is not true. Jeannie Chambers makes a great point. There are families who come here to go hiking who, as you say, are not going to Old Edwards Inn because that's not a place for families. So it is needed. And why do we have a Chamber of Commerce to promote events if we don't have any rooms for them? They don't want to stay halfway to Cashers. And so there are just so many facets to this. But just because a few people are wild and crazy who rent, don't punish everybody else. It's just not fair. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Rick Siegel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Town Board. Thank you for allowing us to address a sensitive matter of the STRs. And I would like to address the letter sent by Mr. Allen, Derek Allen of Allen, Stahl, and Kilburn. And I don't intend to address the second and third points regarding the remedies put forward to short-term rentals, but my comments are intended to address our current UDO, in which Mr. Allen states, and I quote, "The proposed ordinance improperly classifies the rental of residential property to a tourist as a commercial use. This is where I take exception, and this is where I disagree. The word residential, the derivation of which is to reside, implies where one lives, where one gets a gas bill, where one gets an electric bill, get your mail, you got a box in a closet with your important papers. 1 or 2 3-night stay does not represent a residence. It lacks the kind of permanence that you find in an R1 or R2 residential zone. I hold that a motel, hotel, they are businesses, commercial businesses, a business no different than an STR. Hotels, motels, STRs, they are businesses to accommodate folks who are just passing through. They're not residing. Mr. Allen cites court cases he feels supports his opinion. But I would point out that different courts and different judges might see things differently, maybe more along the lines that I do. I believe the same cases could be presented to different judges and get totally different opposite outcomes. How many times have we seen a case go to a lower court and then get overturned on appeal? I would venture to say many. I truly believe the people who wrote the Highlands UDO had a particular intent, and that was to protect residential neighborhoods from being encroached by businesses like wedding venues, hotels, motels. Those who wrote those documents did so to protect the neighborhood. The use of semantics and the twisting the words to make something sound like what they wanted to say is a manipulation of the words and a manipulation of the law. Finally, how many times have we heard from this podium, well, they said I could do it. I was told it was okay to buy and then rent. Who is they? By what authority did they say that you could do that? Did you bother to check it out? I think not, Because if you did, you entered into an enterprise that was in violation of the UDO. If someone gives you a stock tip and it goes bad, the fault is not on the person that gives you a bad stock tip. It's on you. You bought it. Highlands has provisions to accommodate all the commercial businesses I've mentioned, but in their proper, correct zones. I recognize that fighting against the STRs in the R1 and R2 districts may be an uphill battle, may be expensive, but protecting to save our neighborhood, I would say it's worth it. And I would myself participate in that effort. I could be open to a compromise that would stop the occurrence of STRs going forward, but only if the current STRs have a sunset, or if you want to use your word amortization, fine. Let them continue for 2 years or so, whatever, fulfill their rental obligations. But they have, at the end of that time, they must cease and desist. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Okay. Our next speaker is Susan Christine Martin.
I see my time to Charlie.
Okay. The next speaker will be Jennifer Huff then.
I actually ceded my time to Derek Allen, but this statement is on behalf of Sarah Benson. I am a third-generation Highlands homeowner and live in the house that my grandparents built. I have lived next door to a short-term rental for years and have never once had a problem, not at all. The guests have always been absolutely great people, and it's been fun getting to know them while sharing some of the history of our sweet town and letting them get to know Highlands Greenway trails, the waterfalls, and national forests. In my neighborhood, the huge problem has been the frat house right across the road from me. The bad actors are not short-term rentals, they are the property owners. During the summer months, they constantly use their house as a party house with loud music blaring, drunken howling, screaming, yelling, and whooping and hollering during the outdoor fun and games. And this has been going on every single summer for decades. Yes, decades. Let's see. Now, many are pointing their fingers that short-term rentals are the real problem when the town's lack of enforcement of the existing noise, trash, and parking ordinances. That is the real problem. Mr. Taylor, Mayor Taylor, excuse me, you have requested suggestions for a compromise, and here it is. Simply exercise your duties to enforce the current laws. In doing so, Sarah believes that we could all get along just fine and stop the legal madness without taking away Highlands homeowner property rights.
Thank you. All right. Our next speaker is Sandy Carlton.
Good evening. My name is Sandy Carlton, and I live in Highlands since 1985. I'm not in the city limits, but I've been a long-term resident. And also, we've been a business owner for 30 years. So I've seen a lot of changes over the years in Highlands and know how difficult it's been for businesses in the past to survive when we had limited number of people that were here, especially year-round. Right now, tonight, I'm speaking not only on behalf of myself, but also Miss Deborah Martin and Galax Rentals, because I'm the financial manager for the company. So we do handle a number of rentals in the area. And I have a 3-page speech that I was given to speak, but I feel that I'd rather just talk personally, because I think that I've seen what happened in this town as it started growing, and we made a change from being a town that was closed on Sundays, had little lodging, and very few things for people to do. When we had sweet treats for 30 years, early on, after people had dinner, there was nothing for them to do. They came and had ice cream. Now they go to bars. You know, that was a change that was made in this town. It's brought people here. It's given them more things to do, but we are limited on the number of hotel rooms we have. And as was spoken before, every family can't stay in a hotel. If you want to have a little family reunion or bring your children, a home is so much nicer. And I love the stickers that say a home and not a hotel. Yes, we do want people to stay in homes. I think that would be wonderful. I know at Galax Management, we work extremely hard to make sure the homes are maintained. They're not sitting vacant when no one's here. We take care of issues. People that stay in a home let us know, oh, there's a leak here that needs to be fixed, or something's broken in the house. And so these houses are maintained. And I think that's a big advantage. The issues that I was supposed to bring up were issues that have probably been mentioned many times about the benefits to the town, the amount of money that's brought in by these short-term rentals, that they've been here for many years. A number of people couldn't continue to keep their home if they weren't able to rent it out occasionally. I know personally, we have a cabin on our property and we've rented it on a short-term basis. And we've had wonderful renters in it. And again, it's monitoring it, it's maintaining it, it's providing money and into the community, and also allowing people to come to Highlands and enjoy this beautiful place without having to stay a month, like has been proposed. Also, a big change over the years. People used to come here for 6 months and then go back to their home for 6 months. That's not the way people live anymore. People travel for short term and they like to see different areas of the country. And a home is a very much more welcoming place to stay than in a hotel. So I appreciate your listening and thank you.
Okay, our next speaker will be John Richardson.
Bear with me. Thank you for being here. I appreciate the town council and the board for what you've done, the work you've done, especially trying to identify the compromise for the short-term rental issues that we have in Highlands. I'm a retired engineer. I'm John Richardson. I live at 59 Lynn Lane on off Satula Ridge Road. I'm a retired engineer, not a lawyer, but I have read the letters, read the letters from Derek Allen and the Institute of Justice in the local paper. My thoughts are that no matter what the town proposes, other than nothing at all, both are going to be bringing legal action against the town. Why? To me, primarily it looks to be caused by the language being inserted by the town trying to seek the compromise exit for local owners impacted in the zoning rule change. That is the grandfather clause. It does not sound like they are looking for a compromise proposal, but it looks to be a threat to do it my way or else we go to court. It's a shame they want to risk immediate termination of short-term rentals, but that may be the only solution. I did review the planning board recommendations and my thoughts are pretty much what I had earlier this year when I spoke about it. The planning board obviously is not the one who has to enforce all the details of their proposals. The town already has issues enforcing existing ordinances, and this would just increase and complicate it greatly. We were asked to look at what was being proposed, and here I cherry-picked a couple of examples out of it. To satisfy the opposition lawyers, the town should delete the proposed section 4.7.10 and 4.7.11 requirement for short-term rental zoning compliance permit and the non-conforming use permit. That's being looked at as you're requiring them to register. That is, we need to set a future date when the short-term rentals are out of compliance, and then bingo, it's over. This could help totally eliminate the grandfather clause language that seems to be causing so many issues. Elimination of grandfather clause language that we seem to have so much issue with may also eliminate the need for the proposed language in paragraph 7.1.1 and 7.2.1. In closing, the town has the option to make the change simple. End it. It could possibly reduce future litigation from trying to compromise. The lawyers, by their public letters to me, are stating that they have no plans to compromise. Finally, just to do a recap, how many of the 13 proposed amendments in the UDO described in the public session notice could actually be eliminated? Looking at these lawyers' stated position, it's almost guaranteed each change that you propose will be challenged in court. So reduce the number of changes and reduce our legal cost. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Bill Redhorse.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners and staff. My wife and I came to Highlands in 1968. That was actually the year before we were married. We stayed in Horse Cove at a friend's house. He was there. I was at Bill's Soda Shop, where there currently is an ice cream parlor. And I remember sitting in there saying, this would really be a neat town to live in. It was a dream. I was in Miami. I'm one of the few natives in Miami, was born in Miami with gray hair. My wife and I and our family would try and come up here. We'd come for vacation for a week, perhaps two. And yes, we rented houses in Horse Cove. Sometimes we ventured over to Waynesville or Maggie or up to Boone, go to Tweetsie Railroad for the kids. My wife and I tried to come up in the fall sometimes. It was a dream to get here. In 1999, we moved here full time. Mayor Taylor, your father-in-law, asked me one day after a problem that was existing, would I be on the zoning board? He knew of my prior real estate and banking experience. And I said, Buck, Dinah and I moved here to make love, not war. I declined. The following year, he asked me again, had a 3-month vacancy for an alternate member. Much to my surprise and not knowing it was going to occur, I got appointed to the zoning board the night before when I found out about it. I agreed to serve for 3 months. 6 years later, I was off the zoning board. I served with Buzz. Josh, you were a zoning administrator while I was on the zoning board. People would ask me, Bill, how can you rationalize being on a zoning board which has intrusive rules and regulations on people's private property rights? You're such a capitalist. How can you possibly agree to this? And it was tough in some respects because zoning is intrusive. People would come before the zoning board and ask for certain things, and they wanted a variance here or a variance there. We said no. If you don't like the rules, don't buy property in the town of Highlands. Go to the county outside the city limits. There's no zoning. You can do whatever you want to do. We had a case where, have I talked 3 minutes?
You're past 3, yes.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead and finish.
But we had a house where we enforced somebody tearing down part of the house because of it. They violated the rules. commercial use is a commercial use. It's not a residential use. We can argue about fancy definitions of commercial, but when you buy a house, single family zoning, do your due diligence, find out what you can and can't do with your property, go to the city and find out. I'm sorry that people didn't do that, but that's not people's fault here. That's their fault.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker will be Kathy Smith.
How are you? I appreciate what you're doing to tackle this thorny issue. And there's nothing you can do that's going to make everybody happy. But you're doing something very important. If we don't get guardrails up now, and that's what you're doing, we will be facing a whole different ballgame. Right now, this discussion is among friends and neighbors. We're not all happy with each other right now, but at the end of the day, we're still friends and neighbors. When we get into outside investors coming in here buying up blocks of property for STRs, it's going to be a whole different ballgame. So I say potentially, because I hope that we can find a way to get the guardrails in place before that happens. Because if it does, it's going to be really hard to get our town back. And we have something really special here, because even though we're here today, we're friends and neighbors. And my husband and I are going to the PAC after this, and I'll see a lot of you there. And I still think, once we get over our toes getting stepped on, we're still friends and neighbors. But if we let this keep going, this town is going to be owned by outside investors buying up blocks of houses. That's really all I had to say, so I'll make it short and sweet. Thank you. Thank you all for being my friends and neighbors. And we'll still be friends when this is all over, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker will be Jeannie Chambers.
Hello, and thank you. My name is Jeannie Chambers. I live here in Highlands. I'm co-owner of Chambers Realty and Vacation Rentals. And thank you, Kathy. We are all friends and neighbors. I'm glad you brought that out. You've heard from me from before, and here I am again, asking you to take a step back. Look at every little scenario, every noise complaint, every trash and nuisance violation, every parking violation having to do with short-term rentals, and then take into consideration the ones making the complaints. I feel like, at least on social media and on all the newspaper ads and the letters and the editorial pages, Highlands is in the middle of a witch hunt. Or maybe we're in the setting, sort of like in the book, The Lottery. Which side will get the paper with the little black dot? It's as if only one side of this argument, and that's what it is, will win. And we do need a compromise. I'm asking you to listen with compassion. I was so impressed with the planning board's decision. Not that I'm in full agreement with the outcome of their meeting, but of all the voting members showed compassion in coming up with a recommendation that would be, in their eyes, acceptable to the people of this community. I would also like to address the vitriol expressed by some of the people, not all, who live in Highlands. I don't know where they get their facts. They don't cite references. But I guess they think if they're loud enough or throw their clout around heavily enough, that their voices will overshadow some others. There was one person who remarked that in several places all over social media, that short-term rentals should be allowed in Highlands, but only on the Poe side of town. And that's the way it's said. So degrading and hateful. Some have made statements that they can't shop downtown because of all the tourists. And I scratch out tourists because that's been changed over the last few years to say short-term renters. So she's forced to shop in Franklin and Clayton. That's pretty childish too. My point is, Mayor and the town board, you are being tasked with being the teachers in an after-school detention class. All the people in the class are not bad eggs. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Short-term rentals belong in Highlands as much as the owners of the homes they occupy. If R1 needs to have a minimum night rental of 3 to 4 nights to keep the weekenders away, so be it. That should be the only restriction. No registration, no permits. No restrictions except the lease restrictions renters sign before accepting a rental agreement, which includes information about quiet times, trash instructions, parking information, and of course, home occupancy limits. The overcrowding of houses by people who are residing there, and that's a renter who is residing there, and the blatant advertising of such by the property owner should be a finable offense. As a realtor, that's a big stickler with me. We are not allowed to sell a house, to promote a house as sleeping more than it's supposed to be. And that's the way it should be. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Deborah Kirk.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity. I spoke before and I'm for short-term rentals. I've been doing it for years. I've been blessed to have many wonderful folks come through. They book the reservations in town, enjoy the restaurants, enjoy the hiking, and love our community. And they come back again and again. I'm very proud of them, and many of them are long-term friends now. I do want to, like she mentioned social media. I thank God I'm not on social media because I wouldn't want to see that pettiness. But as a full-time resident, I'm Deborah Kirk. I live on Mount Lowry. As a full-time permanent voting resident of Highlands, I'd like to comment on the issue, which to me is such a significant distraction and significant cost and significant annoyance to all of us. It's come to that point, at least in my opinion. It's clearly evident that the rental business here, including the short-term rentals, provide a nice income to individuals like myself, a nice income to the community, and a great service to all those that visit. Should any issue arise with my neighbors, or with my rentals, regardless of whether those folks next to me are permanent, whether they're renters, or whether they're short-term renters, I'm gonna call the Highlands Police Department. If they're violating the statutes in this community, if they're violating the rights of someone else in my community, the local police will be involved immediately. I understand at this point, this whole issue with the short-term rental is based on two complaints from last year. Lord of mercy, all this over 2 complaints. So my point is, so why are we, first of all, spending so much of our tax dollars on the issue? Why are we trying to limit property rights in the community? Why are we usurping our police department's responsibilities? And why are we dictating restrictions that hurt our town revenues? So, also, how do we plan to make up for those losses in business revenues if rentals are limited or eliminated in the R1 and or R2 communities? How are we going to cut town services or salaries when we no longer have that income, which is significant? We know from all the reports and investigations. And I'm disappointed you shook your head at me, Mr. Taylor. You read the same thing I did.
Excuse me, I was, your time's getting close. I didn't shake my head.
Thank you. In closing, I just recommend we toss out this whole issue on short-term rentals and get back to the important town issues that bring the community joy and comfort. Thank you, Mayor.
Mhm. Our next speaker will be Dan Darty.
Hello, Mayor. Hello, Commissioners. I'm Dan Dowdy with Allen Tate, Pat Allen Realtors, and I work in Highlands. I live in Glenville, North Carolina, and I have a short-term rental right across the street from my house. I actually use VRBO and I use Airbnb when I travel. I just paid $7,000 for a week of travel up on the Cape. Let me tell you, I treat that house as my own. And when you pay this kind of money, it's hard earned. And we're bringing people into our town, and I'm an ambassador for Highlands. I spent 5 hours today with ready, willing, and able buyers ready to spend up to $3 million. Let me tell you, we would not be having this conversation today back in 2008. And I'm speaking to y'all, and because the fate of this town is on your shoulders. And you know what? Why does it have to be here or be here? Let's come together with a negotiated agreement. We're all here because we love Highlands. Let's all agree to that. Can we all agree to that? We all agree we love Highlands. Well, let's do what's right for Highlands, and let's come together and let's quit fighting and being, I mean, we're making a mockery of ourselves. There are people dying. There, you know, back in 2008, we would not be having this conversation because our property values were down. But short-term rentals have created the town that we have today. And I love coming here. I love coming to work. I love selling property here. But the people today, they found a house they wanted for 2.25 million. Their decision whether they're going to buy the property, and they're going to use it 3-4 months a year. And when they're not here, they want to be able to temporarily rent it. They will not buy that piece of property. Let me tell you, more and more of those people that come to town that don't do that, your property values will suffer. And going back to where I live, you know, I wasn't happy about a short-term rental being across the street. I'll be honest with you. It's a full-term short-term rental, and I don't like other dogs there. I mean, I had lots of fear about what that meant to my life. Let me tell you, I have made friends, lifetime friends. I've gone to dinner. I've gone hiking. So I just implore commissioners to please, let's come together with this. Let's have a negotiation. Not everybody can win, but what's ever happened in America to us finding middle ground, and let's win for Highlands. Let's don't fight. And I think that we just have open minds and we come to the middle ground. I think that Highlands will benefit. Take $19 million off Main Street. That's a lot of money. That is a lot of money. And that's a lot of my friends, that shop owners, that's people that own businesses, restaurants. It's going to suffer. And I just encourage y'all all to, let's stop fighting. Let's really come together and let's do what's right for Highlands. And that's not winning. That's negotiated agreement in the middle. So if Highlands had more hotels, they could support the businesses, but without the short-term rentals, the businesses that we enjoy, Wolfgang's, Primary, all the places we go, they're not going to be there like they are for us now. They're going to suffer. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Laura Puckett.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm going to read my statement because I'm a really bad speaker. So, I attended the recent planning board meeting and was very impressed by the insightful and thoughtfulness of most of the members. After hearing Attorney Coward's answers to the board's questions, a few answers clearly stood out, which I think a few other people have mentioned and Attorney Coward can confirm. Short-term rentals are and always have been legal in R1 and R2 zoning districts in Highlands. 2, short-term rentals are residential and not commercial uses according to state and federal law. The city has a very uncertain chance of prevailing in the lawsuits that will be filed. Knowing all of this, I'm wondering how the powers that be can, in good conscience, take away the private property rights from owners who purchased property in Highlands in good faith with the intention of renting it part-time, especially now when it has been confirmed it was perfectly legal at the time of purchase. What also stood out was the fact that the planning board completely rejected both proposed ordinances suggestions from the town board. We love Highlands and everyone here. For those who claim to have the best interest of the town of Highlands at heart, we respectfully ask you to please consider the following. Consider the hundreds of owners that will be hurt who purchase property that could legally and still legally be used for short-term rentals at the time of purchase. Please consider those Highlands owners' rights. Please consider that there has been very little to no complaints to the town regarding short-term rentals. And we have current ordinances that deal with parking, trash, and noise. And also consider the fact that short-term rentals have always peacefully coexisted in Highlands neighborhoods. The cost of enforcement of whatever you propose and the discord that it will create and has already created amongst neighbors, that really needs to be considered too. I guess we've already spent $10,000 on enforcement software and to track us. So also the fact that local businesses will lose 15 to 20% of their revenue or more. The study shows that an average of $120,000 per business annually will be lost. How many small businesses can afford that? Consider the constitutional private property rights of the citizens that this will harm. Also, I think we really need to consider the fact that those people who purchased property in a residential neighborhood and did not want rentals in their neighborhoods had a choice to buy in a rental restricted neighborhood. The city will be litigating damages for years with our taxpayer dollars and is likely to lose in court and will be responsible for hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and restitution. I really think that a stakeholder workshop should happen before taking any action. There are many sides of this story, and I think everybody should have a voice. An economic impact study should be done by the city, as it's going to be devastating to local businesses, and they should have those facts to consider. I also think that the public should be made aware of the attorney fees incurred to date and potential for cost of lawsuits in the future, as the Save Highlands group has almost 300 members. I think the town board has a really easy decision. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Leave things as they are, spend our taxpayer dollars answering the very few complaints that there are. Use the money that will be spent on attorney fees to improve our town. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Frida Bennett.
You can't give a civics teacher 3 minutes and not hear it. It's just, I can't pass it up. So thank you for listening to me. The first thing is thank you for accepting this amazingly impossible job. I voted for you because I knew the one thing, that you cared about Highlands. You would look at the laws, you would look at the legal advice you were given, and that you would look at what was right. And that was the reason I voted. Now, a controversy in Highlands, heck, we fight all the time. In fact, it was in 2011 and this month of coming September where ETJ, y'all remember that? We were all going to go over the waters and it was going to end everything. That was pretty controversial, but nothing like the second red light in town. I mean, my gosh, we were at each other's throats. And when the third one went in, we were just positively going to pass out because we couldn't have it. And then now I'm not kidding y'all. And then lo and behold, we put a stop sign on Spring Street. And that was just more than most of us could handle because who needs that? Now I'm wasting a lot of your time, but what I'm saying is the biggest fight I think we ever had, do we need a hospital? Many of you were involved in that. And you know how we fought and we talked and we cajoled, but this is different because now we've got Highlanders fighting Highlanders and we've got Highlanders suing Highlanders and we've got people calling us names and it's just different. And I don't know why, but it shouldn't be that way. And I thought, well, why is it different? Well, stop me when it's, you've got to stop me. So, okay, let me give you some figures about Hope Knob. That might be horse out of town they're talking about. But anyway, Hope Knob, if I walk it 2 or 3 times a day, and that I walk 2 circles, and then to just make sure you see the situation, it's about 2 1/4 miles around two circles. And this isn't scientific, but there were 58 houses in my walk. Now listen to this. 45% of those houses are STRs with more to come. That's a lot. Now, how do I know that? Because I'm nosy. I was a teacher. I knew everything going on. I see them. I run into them on the roads. They advertise our streets as walking streets, and by golly, all right, 45% short term. Now you can fight with me on that. I'm used to fighting. 3% long-term rentals. There were 19% full-time people that I know of. I'm just saying. 1% employee housing. And I'll tell you this, that employee housing came in 2014. It changes. And I have never once had a problem with them. Never once had a problem with the trash, never once had a problem with loud noise, never once had a problem with parking or them running me out of the road. Now, all of that is an everyday occurrence in my life now. So 1% employee housing and 32% part-time. So you can see where we're going in a very established neighborhood. Please don't hold me to those exact numbers. I taught civics, not math. Okay. Now, the next thing is I wanted to mention the Tax Act and Jobs Act.
Your time is getting close.
Okay. That's the reason we're here tonight. There is tons of money with that bonus depreciation and with all of the deductions, and now you can deduct in 5 or 15 years. Nobody's going to lose their money if they have to sell tomorrow. Not according to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is William Long. Okay, the next would be Charles Nalbon. Oh, I'm sorry, hold it, Charlie. I made a mistake. Julie Weller is our next speaker. I had some scratch throughs and I missed it. I'm sorry, Julie. Thank you.
Thank you all for taking the time to do this. I know you're tired, especially after so many other speakers. My name is Julie Weller. I have a house at the entrance of Bowery Road. When we took this project on, some people told us that it was the eyesore of the neighborhood. But we've converted it into a cute little bungalow. The property originally belonged to my great-grandmother, who came here since the 1920s. She purchased the property in 1934. Since then, Highlands has been part of my blood. I can't remember a time where I didn't spend summers up here, and it's a very, very precious place to me. I get it that no one wants to live next to someone who's loud or rowdy or might be violating city ordinances. And I understand that position, but there's no reason to use a cannon to kill a fly. The positions taken by the Institute for Justice and Save Highlands speak for my husband and I. We have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars renovating the property with plans to retire here. I have retired from the state government August 1st. We rent to the most lovely and precious people. One woman was coming with her mother. It was the last trip they were going to take before she passed into heaven. Another woman was coming with her mother who had MS. My property was specially designed for my mother who had mobility issues. That's not a service you can get everywhere. I even rent to my own neighbors. I rent to local residents when they need overflow, and we've never had a single complaint. With all that being said, there's a really much greater tragedy here. We all think of Highlands as this wonderful Hallmark movie place.
I love and adore my neighbors, even the ones on the other side of this issue. The damage and the division that's being created is extremely distressing. And I beg you to please, as this commission, to sit down at the table and just talk, just once. Please sit down at the table and talk. My husband and I are both attorneys. My husband handles this type of litigation. We're confident that Save Highlands and the Institute for Justice are on solid legal ground. But that's not the point. The point is we've got chapters far beyond after this issue is settled. Please sit down on the table and talk before the damage, too much damage is done to our relationships, because that's critical. And finally, there's a serious concern among a number of us that feel like the surveys, the software, the registrations are nothing more than a market survey to do what was done in Charleston, where some big property owners are just using that to turn their properties in the right zones into big hotels. And that's going to turn this town into a Vail, not a Hallmark movie. Thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. We've got two more speakers. One came in right at the 5:05 mark, so he'll be the last speaker. The next speaker will be Charles Nelbon.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Thank you, Board of Commissioners. I'm Charlie Nalbone. I've been a homeowner in Highlands for 28 years. Like most others here, I love and cherish this town, and I know that you all do the same. The hard work that you have all put in for the last year on this is remarkable, and we all appreciate it. I want to make a couple of quick points on topic, Mr. Mayor, to how you wanted this hearing to go. First of all, I think of the three proposals in front of you, the planning board proposal has to be rejected by the Board of Commissioners. The proposal of the planning board is 180 degrees opposite of the long-term community plan that this town adopted less than 6 weeks ago. In addition, the planning board proposal is 180 degrees opposite to the very clearly stated position of the vast majority of Highlands residents and voters as reflected in the community survey. So I think simply that proposal has to be just set aside and disregarded. Secondly, the grandfathering proposal should be rejected. It creates two classes of homeowners in this town. It creates a favored class, and that is the short-term rental investing class. And it creates a disfavored class, which is the rest of the homeowners in Highlands who simply want to live in their neighborhoods in the peace and quiet that existed in their neighborhoods prior to the explosion of short-term rentals. I don't think that it is fair or a validation of the property rights of the existing homeowners that they be put in that position through a grandfathering proposal, which creates a permanent monopoly in the hands of the short-term rental industry. The only rational and fair option in front of you is the amortization proposal. As we have established this evening, it is legal and it is within the town's zoning powers. We do think that there are two elements of the amortization proposal that need to be improved. The first is right now that proposal does not prohibit new short-term rentals during the amortization period. We think that it is simply a matter of good stewardship for this town that we don't get a hole dug bigger over the next 2 years that then has to be taken care of after a 2-year period. And we think that the banning of short-term rentals upon the adoption of the amortization proposal is a proper way for the town to proceed with, and that the town has no need to have a complex non-conforming use permit scheme if they adopt this approach, and they can simply enforce on a case-by-case basis if someone is turned in and can't prove that they were renting their home short-term prior to the adoption of the amortization proposal. That's all that it requires. We also think that in the amortization proposal, that the homestay category needs to be prohibited in the R1 and R2 zones. Simply put, homestays are a hosted short-term rental. They are a hosted short-term rental, not different from tourist homes, except they have none of the regulatory provisions that currently keep tourist homes as a appropriate use in the R2 neighborhoods. A homestay provision in the amortization proposal would simply create a enforcement nightmare for the town that the town simply doesn't have the personnel and the resources to enforce, and it will give the short-term rental industry a loophole large enough to drive a truck through. And for that reason, we think it should be restricted from R1 and R2. So I want to close and hopefully give you all back the rest of your night and talk about the real world consequences, because in the last year, this town, this board has been really attacked and bullied with made up statistics and threats, information requests, open record requests, threatening letters, all sorts of things. And studies that say when short-term rentals are banned and amortized, that we will look up and Main Street will be vacant. Common sense says that's simply not true. It is a simple fact that the R1 and R2 neighborhoods in the town of Highlands are a tiny little geography on the entire Highlands Cashers Plateau. And whether it's good or bad, the rest of the Highlands Cashers Plateau has no zoning and no regulation. The consequence of banning short-term rentals and amortizing the existing ones in the very small R1 and R2 neighborhoods of Highlands will be that the neighbors and residents will get to return to the neighborhoods that they bought into or built into. And people will continue to come to Highlands. They will stay in short-term rentals. Those short-term rentals will be outside the R1 and R2 neighborhoods. They will shop in town. They will dine in the restaurants. They will even attend weddings in the town of Highlands. But the neighbors and the neighborhoods will be restored to what they were originally intended to be, which are places for people to reside, not people to stay in mini hotels. And I really thank all of you for the work and effort that you put in, because we're all here because we believe that Highlands is worth saving and Highlands is worth fighting for. And we thank you, Mr. Mayor, and you, Board of Commissioners, for being willing to fight to save the future of Highlands. Thank you very much.
All right, and then our last speaker on the list is Mike Huffler. Mike.
I'll be quick. Thank you. I own a house on Little Bear Pen. I've had it for 27 years. Little Bear Pen is just one of the nicest little neighborhoods. Everyone knows each other. Everyone looks out for each other. But unfortunately, the short-term rentals have caused problems, especially for me. For 25 years, I had a single person living next to me, and now it is a short-term rental. And it's advertised as 12 guests, 7 bedrooms, 14 beds, and 4 baths. So I went from a single person to, I think someone talked about the complaints. I called the police twice last year. I think I counted 17 cars next to me at one time. There's always at least 6 or 7 cars. It's just a big house. It's a small hotel, basically. I tried to call the Franklin. I called the Franklin Department of Health, because I'm like, that house could not have been, the septic tank could not support that many people. And they said, well, that's not our problem, because someone told me that's the way to go. But anyway, I'd like to see it changed. I don't know. It's really been a problem for us, and it's been really sad. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes all the people on the list of speakers. Let me announce that the town board will be meeting again on August the 30th. That is a Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock here in the community center, and we will begin processing the information that we've received and developing amendments to the ordinances to address short-term rentals. That will be a public meeting, but it will be a workshop session where the commissioners will be discussing how to proceed from this point in time. Do I have a motion that we close the public hearing? Okay, second, all in favor? And then do I have a motion that we adjourn? All in favor? Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you for participating and being very responsive. Thank you so much.